When I look at an article, I look at the author, I look at who they work for, I look at some of their political interests, I look at who they're involved with, just to see what narrative they are trying to push. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that will just read a headline and believe it.
Because I disagree with most of what Jimmy said. Most of it. I just do.
Didn't you go and film hospitals, empty hospitals?
I did. I
did too.
Empty.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry. I can't make this up. Empty. This isn't my opinion.
Yeah.
This is just the reality of the situation. They were empty. I'm walking in and around these hospitals. I don't see a big line of people. They had tents out there. No one was there. The tents. It's like, it's where's the catastrophe?
Yep.
But I'm just saying, like, from a rational, reasonable person's perspective, okay, fine. If a mask works, I will wear it because I don't want to get people sick.
Yeah.
I will wear it. I'm like, yeah, okay, they kind of suck. They're kind of hot. They're kind of annoying. But if I'm saving people's lives, like for real, of course I'm going to do that. But they don't. The studies show they don't. Well, we're back.
Yay.
Yay. Yep. How you guys doing?
We're doing good.
Round table
you doing
is
all right?
coming for you.
That wrong song, dude. We changed that.
Yeah, we changed that.
Oh,
I will always love that song.
We got a lot of people that were like, what happened to y'all's song?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, we're changing direction.
A new
so
chapter.
It just didn't fit.
Yeah. Didn't fit.
Yeah.
So, but we're glad to have everyone back. Thanks for the support that we had on our last video.
A lot of really positive feedback. I was a little surprised by that.
Yeah.
But that gives me hope for what we're talking about today. That
I
we got
wasn't.
that
I mean,
many
people love us. They missed us.
Yeah, I guess so.
They did.
I saw it coming.
But I think what a lot of people liked was the fact that, we're expounding past Watchtower and actually talking about everyday things, and that's important for when you wake up and leave a cult, is to keep progressing. You don't want to stay stuck in that same atmosphere and talking about the same thing over and over again. So I'm glad we're able to, move forward and go do something like this.
Absolutely.
I look at it this way. Well,
it's all about growth.
When you're taking a trip down the highway, sometimes you got to stop at a rest stop, right? Mm-hmm. But you don't pitch a tent there. No. You don't live there, right? So when you're exiting Watchtower, whatever
you take
belief
a moment,
system,
you move on.
Yes, you need to take time to recover, but then you need to keep going. You got a path you're on, and you need to get down that path. If you stay stuck, that's just not healthy.
No.
Plus the food at rest stops sucks. You don't want to live off of that stuff.
And unfortunately, in our form of religion, that's the case for a lot of people. Is they're just stuck. They're doing the same thing and acting the same way that they did 5, 10, 15 years ago. And that's just a recipe for destruction.
Well, you had the critical thinking skills to wake up. Great. That's awesome. Pat on the back. And now I think we need the social skills to be able to move on with our lives.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And speaking of critical thinking, that is what we're going to talk about today. Now, we have to disclaim this first, so let's run through it. All right, I wrote a little thing. We are not doctors, virologists, or scientists, and what we are doing is just telling our own personal stories. Nothing we say should be considered medical advice or used to make
That's right.
any medical decisions. We're just storytelling here to help people understand how we arrived at where we are.
Absolutely.
Do you hear that, YouTube? That is what we're
Really?
telling you. I don't think it's going to work.
We are
but
just
we're
telling
It's not gonna
our
work.
That's not
personal
gonna work.
stories.
Yeah.
That's it.
And that's what we're about to do. Jimmy's going to go first. Jason's going to go second. And I'll go last.
Oh, wow.
What has happened over the last 18 months, almost 2 years now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what did we believe in
long
the
time.
beginning? And how did that progress to where we are today? So without further ado, Jimmy, go ahead and
Okay.
take it away. Tell
All
us your
right.
story.
So I guess, well, let me say this. With the three of us, we're a little different. I guess I'm going to be the one that is the more conspiratorial.
A little bit.
Little bit.
Yeah.
Little bit.
But we will say, and these guys can agree with me, that some of the stuff that I've said even last year actually came true.
Can't deny it. Some of it.
Fair
Yeah,
enough.
some of it.
But they were significant things.
Fair
yeah,
enough.
They were.
Yeah,
That's fair.
You know,
Yeah.
because we talked about the mask thing a year ago, and I was like, I ain't doing this crap.
True.
You know, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
Well,
So
he was never into it, but
and one thing that I was telling John before we started recording today is when we started doing roundtable videos in 2019, and if I were to come on here and would have said, hey, y'all, guess what's going to happen in 2020? There's going to be a surprise virus. They're going to lock us all down. They're going to
It's
do
going to
this.
suck.
They're
Yeah.
going to do this. They're going to do that. Oh, and then they're going to start making people take vaccines, and they're going to force. Y'all would have thought I lost my daggone mind.
that's true.
You know?
I had already thought you lost part of your mind
I
based on the
believed
other
it.
things, which I had to eat some crow on that. The mask thing.
I kind of felt that way, even though I knew, okay, granted, I can't prove this. It's just, I know from personal experience and from things that I've seen and from people like that, this is the kind of things that they do.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
we saw that in our former religion. We've seen that on the media
Mm-hmm.
over and over again. Anytime you watch it, you want to ask yourself, what is the angle? Because they're definitely going somewhere with this. They don't just put this stuff out here to put this stuff out here. They don't go through all that effort for nothing.
Yeah, there's a reason
Yeah.
why they do it.
There's a reason.
And so our job, I felt like my job was to figure out what that reason was. And that's a good segue into what I was going to start on my story. Okay, so this is my story. So for the ones that want to hate on me or whatever, I know that's going to happen. I don't care. Okay?
Nobody could hate you, Jimmy. You're a
Yeah.
nice guy.
I try to be. So I don't care about that. So this is just my story, my experience. This is how I've gotten to where I've gotten. So when everything started last year, I would say it was like middle of March is when I started getting clued in on everything. And one of the things that happened to me was, why was there so much hatred from the media towards Donald Trump? And we already know I'm a Trump supporter, so just let that go and let it be. Okay, that's what it is. What it
He
is.
is.
Okay, so that was my main thing. I was wanting to know, why was there so much hatred just every day? Seemed like every hour, every day. And I started thinking back, well, we haven't had that level of hatred towards a POTUS. And I don't know when. I don't know if it was Reagan. I mean, I'm sure I was young then, so I don't know everything back then. But that's just started, I started questioning things. Why? Why the hatred? All right. So for me, it was just the level of hatred. And so I started asking questions. I started looking at some other material that would start explaining things to me. And one of the things that was sent to me was by a friend. I'll just do her initials, JH. I won't call her out on the video today. But she sent me a couple of videos to watch. And one of the videos was done by a guy named Joe M. That video was called The Plan to Save the World. Then I saw a video called The Fall of Cabal. Then I watched another video called Out of Shadows. Now, I don't know if you guys have seen any of those yet. If you can, look for them, find them. They're out there. If you can't find them, shoot me a message and I can send them to you. But those three videos are what I started. This is where I started my process at. And then it opened my eyes to so many different things that was going on in this world. Some of it, a lot of it I couldn't prove. Okay. But it just gave me a reason to dig further. So That then it led into finding out about Q information, the Q drops. Now, I know a lot of people are going to start saying, oh my God, he's a QAnon supporter and all this. But here's the thing, and I've been wanting to say this for a while. The information that was provided on those drops is all military information. That's my everything I'm getting ready to tell you is my opinion. So when I started looking at this stuff, I didn't know what they meant. I didn't know what was going on. And so I started to, speculate publicly on something, which I shouldn't have done in the beginning because I didn't know about it. And so some of the things that I thought was going to happen around Easter of 2020, that didn't happen. And then there was a post that came out a little later saying, don't focus on the dates. Don't worry about the dates. Look at actions, look at events, look at things that the mainstream media is not reporting on, and go down those roads. So that's what I started to do, because in the beginning, I was a little like, what in the world? Oh my goodness, the deep state's about, everybody's getting ready to get arrested. I had no clue that there was a strategically planned way of doing this, and we were just in the beginning. So anyway, so I followed the Q drops, and for those out there that want to already speak out against that, there's no one person that is leader of the Q. Okay, it's like 10 people, and 7 of them are military, 3 are non-military. And so there's no leader, there's no cult, because they don't tell you, to worship the leader. They don't tell you that you got to do this and you got to do that. One thing that I like about it is the fact that it totally supports thinking for yourself. Here's the information, take it for what you want it for, and go down the roads that you need to go down. And we're going to give you a little guidance on where to find this information. So when I started doing that, along with some of the other videos, I started to create a picture of what I could see that was happening. And the coronavirus and everything was part of this plan. I do believe that it's all been a design distraction to take away from what is really going on behind the scenes. That's the way I feel.
I agree with that.
That's the way I feel about that. Now, as far as sources, one of my main sources that I went to was the X22 report, x22report.com. And what I did is, in the beginning, when I started watching his information, I was like, okay, this kind of falls in line with some of the stuff I'm already learning. However, let me go back in time, because he started like 2011, 2012. So he's been out a while. And so I started to go back and look at some of the stuff that he did in previous years. And it actually matched up with things that happened in 2013, 2014, 2015. So I'm like, okay, so this guy seems pretty legit to me. And so I started watching him nightly. And so for the first 3 to 4 weeks or so, I'm learning all this stuff, and my wife is picking up on it. And I'm like, is this stuff real? Can you believe this? And she's like, it looks legit to me. So anyway, so we started, keeping up to date on the Q drops, seeing what was coming out, following X22. And then there were other sources of information that I started looking at as well. But one thing that I had to make sure of was that even though this movement was growing, there were people that were installed into this movement to make it look like it was crazy. So when these folks would come out and say, oh, well, the QAnon people said this or this, that wasn't the case. It was like this year when they said that the QAnon people were going to revolt because Trump wasn't installed in August. They said that was actually Maggie Haberman from the New York Times. They actually put that out there to make the Q people look bad. And that's another thing. When it comes to the Q stuff, there is no QAnon. There's Q, and then there's the Anons. The Anons are what we are, where we go through, we decipher the Q drops, we look at everything and try to match up and figure out what's going on. It's like us putting a puzzle piece together. And that's what all of this is. Everything we're dealing with right now, in my opinion, is one huge puzzle. And only thing that the Q drops did for me and the ones that look at that was helping us, it's like, you might want to try that puzzle piece right there. See if it fits. Okay. And then if I took it and it worked, I was like, okay, yeah, that works. So I feel like we're all just been trying to put this big old piece of puzzle together. I'm sorry. And there's so many pieces involved in this. This is way bigger than anybody ever imagines. And so when I got up with these guys, we went to dinner one night back in the spring of 2020. And I was like, guys, I'm not buying into this mask stuff. I don't believe COVID with the hype that the mainstream media is putting out there. I don't think it's real.
I remember that.
I was like, no, I think this is all BS. And of course, they weren't buying that.
I certainly wasn't at the time. I certainly wasn't. And just to be clear, like, this is all our individual stories. We have many differences. Like, Jimmy and I really disagree on a lot of the stuff that he's saying, but we've seen enough similar threads of things going on for us to be like, okay, I don't think it's what you're saying it is, but it's definitely not what they're saying it is.
Exactly.
So yeah, we can agree with that.
And like I told John before we started this video, even if half of the stuff that I believe is on the horizon or is taking place, even if half of the stuff is true, it's better than what the alternative is. Because if I'm completely wrong about what I've been seeing, then we're all screwed. That's just how I feel about it. Because y'all know me, that I always look for the good in humanity. I really do believe that mankind, the people, I believe people are waking up right now. And that was the whole thing. Only thing that this information was designed to do was to wake the people up and give them the information. This is why I feel like Trump was always talking about the fake news, to let people know, hey, you can't trust what's being told to you in the news. Go elsewhere, find other information, alternative information, to help you draw your conclusion on a point that's being made or being pushed. So April and May, it was just mad research every day. I have literally, since the middle of March of 2020, researched every day on something. And one thing that I do about my research, and I think we mentioned this before, I'll just mention it real quick again, is when I look at an article, I look at the author, I look at who they work for, I look at some of their political interests, I look at who they're involved with, just to see what narrative they are trying to push. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that will just read a headline and believe it.
That's true. That is very true.
And so I didn't want to do that. Now, have I made the mistake, in the beginning of learning all this stuff, of looking at a headline and being, hey guys, look at this. Yeah, I've done it once or twice, but I try not to do it, because one of the things is when you're a person who goes on into intuition and more down I hate to even use the word, but conspiratorial path, you really try to make sure that what you say is going to be legit, because you don't want to be laughed at. You don't want to be mocked. Right. And you kind of got a reputation on the line, so to speak.
Yeah. Sure.
So that's why I try to put the as best information out there that I can. And so my whole goal was, after I learned all this, I started, creating different platforms to where people who were being laughed at and mocked at, where we could get together and talk about this stuff. Because then, I could learn something from somebody else. There's another source that I can look at and draw my conclusions from. So it was a way for us to be able to communicate. And that was one problem I was having with the former religion and the former community that we were in, is because they just, oh my God, attack after attack. And you're crazy and you're this. There was so much projection going on. So I had to create something to where those who were, I'm going to just say digital soldiers, freedom-loving people, whatever you want to call it, where we had a place to where we could talk about things and be like, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And we could be able to feed off each other, because our main goal was to get the right information out to people to be able to wake them up. Because once you wake people up, you can't put them back to sleep.
Yeah.
That's true.
I've seen that to be the case.
Yeah.
It was with me.
And so there's so many things that are involved in this. We don't have the time to go into it today, But there's so many. There's the history of the globalists and the agendas. There is the color revolution, which if you don't know what that is, look up the color revolution, because I do believe that the George Floyd incident was the catalyst. That was the match that started the color revolution.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
They wanted, these globalist deep state people, I do believe that they wanted a race war here in America. That's what they wanted, but they didn't get it. And because they didn't get the race war that they wanted, they moved into the whole coronavirus, vaccine, stuff like that. And racism. I think we went to racism after that, it kind of tied together. But anyway.
Not to get you too off track, but didn't you say that happened in 2 or 3 other places?
Yeah, there was actually pictures.
A George Floyd-like incident.
Yes, there was pictures from Paris. There was pictures from Australia. There was pictures of England of a officer with their neck on somebody. So it just didn't happen here in the United States. And so why were those pictures there? To put it out in the media of that area as well. So what we're dealing with, what I believe we're dealing with, is a worldwide situation going on. These globalist deep state operatives, they've been in power for so long, and they want to hold on to that power, and they're going to do anything that they can to keep it. That's why we see so much crap going on in the world today, in my opinion. There's a lot more, but that kind of gives you an idea, and I'll add on some other stuff as we go along.
Okay. Now, I want to say a couple of things. One, and this is one of the things I like about us. Like, we don't have to agree, because I disagree with most of what Jimmy said. Most of it. I just do. But also to be
Here's
fair,
the other thing.
We're honest.
I don't care.
and to be fair about it, though, because I want to be objective and fair. I also haven't read or watched or dug into the things that Jimmy has. So I can admit, in the same way that I don't believe the earth is flat. I know I'm going to get some flack for that one. I don't believe the earth is flat, but it's not because
Don't do it, John.
It's not because I've actually been in a spaceship looking down at the planet to know that it's round. I don't buy into a narrative like that without enormous amounts of evidence. And I have not been down that rabbit hole, but I just don't agree. So I'm just going to say that, because I think it's important for people to know we have different worldviews. We have different views on a lot of this, but we all know something's seriously wrong.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
We know that. So you don't have to believe the same narrative Jimmy or me or
Ain't
Diasiss
much arguing that.
to use your good sense and know that something's wrong.
And the thing about when I started doing the research and I was going down what we would call the rabbit holes, there's a lot of rabbit holes. There is so much information out there that you can get bogged down in it and you can get confused. So there was certain things that I couldn't buy into. I mean, we'll just say it because it's probably gonna get deleted anyway. But you have. I don't know yet because I can't speak for it. But like the reptilians. I don't know. That's kind of hard. That's kind of hard for me to go down that road. Okay. So I stay away from that. I don't know. Could it be? Never know. Whatever. Remember we said last time the aliens came down in our yard.
Yeah.
But so I tried to stick to things that were matching up with what was being portrayed in the news, because whatever they're telling you in the
seem
news,
a little more realistic.
Yeah, exactly. So whatever they're telling you in the news, you got to figure, okay, what's the opposite of that? Yeah. And that's what I looked for. And that's when I found a lot of answers.
I got you.
So that's what
one story I want you to tell before we move to Diasiss' story. The box of masks.
Okay.
The story that was like the Kindle for this flight.
Yeah. So for me, this whole thing about COVID, I'm not going to deny the fact that there may be a sickness out there. I mean, I do feel like the United States and the world, in fact, we believe we were all attacked by a bioweapon. I do believe that. What I don't believe is the hype that they've been portraying. And when they said that we had to put masks on in the beginning, or when they were going to lock everything down, I was cool with the whole 15 days to slow the spread. I actually put a thing on my Facebook that said, hey, y'all, just take 2 weeks off. Take a vacation, get things caught up around the house.
I thought that was BS.
Okay. But I bought into it.
Sure.
I bought into it. 2 weeks. But then after the 2 weeks, they moved it, the goalpost. And then that's when they started saying, hey, everyone needs to wear a mask. Everybody needs to lock down. And I'm like, a mask? Why are we wearing a mask? They've never told us to wear a mask before. The flu's been around forever. So I was at one of my accounts for work. And I was sitting there and I was about this close to the employees and there was 4 of them. And I'm just talking to them like I normally do. Well, the guy comes through, I guess the head guy or whatever. He says, y'all need to put masks on. I'm like, why? Well, the box is right over there. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to be respectful to the business. Let me go ahead and look at this. So I grabbed the box and I showed the people I said, look, it says, does not protect against a virus. Right there, that was all I needed.
Just do what you're told.
That was all I needed. So Carissa ended up going on to Etsy.com and she ordered these lanyards that I wore. Y'all saw it.
Yeah.
That said, can't mask, don't ask. Because I was not complying with these masks thing, especially when, Fraudsy, yeah. Especially when he says, well, you don't need a mask. Oh, now you need a mask. Now you need 2 masks. Oh, maybe you need 3. He didn't even know what the hell he was talking about.
No.
So it didn't make any sense at all. So when you have been in a high control group and people are telling you things and you're starting to question it, but you don't act on it, this is what's different about us now, I do believe. Because if somebody tells me something now, I just don't openly just believe it. I have to look at why I should believe it. Yeah. So why am I wearing a mask? Oh, to protect other people. No, well, it did not make sense. So from that point on, I was like, yeah, this is all bullcrap. And then, of course, the whole thing with the HCQ, when the media pounded on that, the Lancet report. Right. And then they had none of it made sense. So all of this whole time, I've worn a mask 4 times. And the only reason why is because I went into businesses that I do business with and I wanted to respect them. Other than that, haven't worn them, won't wear them, and won't be getting the vax either.
Got you. Okay. Well, that is Jimmy's story.
Parts of it. The part that'll fit in this. We're trying not to make this too long. Yeah.
Now let's move to Diasiss. Beginning of last year, what's your story?
Beginning of last year, from the very beginning, what the hell is the angle now? What are they trying to do? Where is this going to end? Same thing. Oh, yeah, just a few days and, just 2 weeks, whatever it was. I was like, they're not going to. They're using this to buy time to start reinforcing it. And it's going to continue on until God knows when. Mm-hmm. So from the jump, I was skeptical of it because I've been skeptical of the media ever since 9/11. Ever since that, ever since that, and just looking at the entertainment industry, I've been very skeptical of anything that they really try hard to cement down as a fact and then try to get you to go along with it. And pretty much anything that anybody does when they do something like that is not about honesty. To me, it's about control. And I just won't go with it. Mm-hmm. Just not gonna go with it. And I hate the way that in our former religion, they are even starting to pressure my daughter. She's indirectly being affected by this now because, in our former religion, they're not saying, oh, you have to take the vaccine, but they are. They're saying, well, you don't have to. It's a matter of personal decision. However, wouldn't you be a more spiritual person and more concerned with the needs of others if you do get it? So there's the subtle pressure, and they're making it a taboo to speak against it. So to me, that's something you need to be cautious about. And now my daughter is even at the point where she's saying, I just want to get it so I can just be able to do stuff again. I'm like, well, what about the health problems or the health concerns of it? What about the fact that they have not finished fully testing this? And she's like, well, I want to be able to go places. I want to be able to go places without a mask. I want to feel, free to do more things that I want, as if that's going to make a difference. Here's the problem here. Even if you get the vaccine, you still have to wear a mask in most places. You still have to keep up with the vaccine because you can still get sick. Mm-hmm. It's just, where does it end? Mm-hmm. That's what I keep trying to talk to my daughter about and other people. Where does it end?
Listen to us and we'll give you your freedoms back.
Yeah.
This country was not founded on that. We have freedoms, and our freedoms are our rights. It shouldn't be held over our head as a way for somebody to push an agenda.
Exactly. You can't go places, you can't get a job. You can lose your job. Exactly. Unconstitutional. Exactly.
Every bit of it. And this is this is where it goes back to what I believe as far as the deep state globalist operations.
Right.
Because they do not like the Constitution. They don't want the Constitution there.
I mean, we never did this for the flu shot.
No.
We never did this for the flu shot. And the flu kills just as many people, probably, I think, just about as many people a year as COVID does. Mm-hmm. Maybe more. I don't know, because a lot of people they get the flu and then they get pneumonia. And so what do you call it? They died from complications of the flu. So if this is no different than that, then why is it for so many years it hasn't been a big deal to make sure that we get our flu shot, but all of a sudden you can lose your job, you can't travel over getting COVID, something that, if I'm not mistaken, has a
9.99x survival rate.
Mm-hmm. And that's something I'll talk a little bit about, because I know a lot of people will say that isn't true. Like, when you're talking about the flu, for kids, there's no question, if you look at the data, like, even if you assume that every child who died with COVID, again, my opinion, not a doctor, not a virologist, not a scientist. Right. When I look at the numbers and it says that they died with COVID, that means they had it when they died. It was there. Even those numbers, if you include all of those kids, fewer children died from COVID or with COVID than the previous flu season that was on record. Killed children. Mm-hmm. So at least for certain groups of people, the survival rate is like insane. And Public Health England literally is showing 0 deaths for anyone 18 and under. 0.
Right. And this is one reason why in the beginning of the spring of last year that you had 5 governors in the United States that were moving sick people into nursing homes. Because why? They knew it wasn't as bad as they said it was going to be. Right. So they had to,
and a lot of nurses have said that.
They had to push up the death numbers. They had to push up the fear. I mean, you had 2 huge hospital ships sent to New York and LA. You had field hospitals that were created. They barely saw anyone. If this thing was so bad, then why were those ships pretty much left empty? Why were those hospitals, those makeshift hospitals, why were they pretty much empty?
Exactly.
Why was everybody getting moved into nursing homes? So these are the things that, I know for me, and I know for you too, we started questioning, okay, well, how bad is this really?
Right. I mean, why are so many people buying into this? That, if we're just being level-headed about it, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, I can't say it any other way. There is no nicer way to say it. It doesn't make sense.
And I remember you told me this pretty early on last year. You had bird flu.
Yep.
And what was the other one?
I'm not sure if they're the same, but I've had, years ago when the media was talking about swine flu and bird flu, I've had both of those.
Right. And your take was, well, I mean, it kind of sucked, but it wasn't the end of the world. And you got better and all as well. And so that caused you to question coming into this, is it really what they're saying? I remember you telling me about that.
Yeah. And the thing is too, I mean, I go by what I see. I mean, I am, notoriously someone who just goes by what I see. I don't see full hospitals. I don't see people dropping dead left and right if this thing is so bad. I see people getting, the vast majority of people that are getting it are, talking about flu-like symptoms and a lack of being able to breathe easily, lack of taste and smell, which lingers for a while, but ultimately everybody's okay. Most of the people that, are okay. Now, granted, I have heard and been around people who have gotten really sick from this thing. But in my opinion, it doesn't seem like it'd be anybody that would be any different if it was the flu with complications of pneumonia or complications of the flu, whatever you want to call it. They would get sick anyways.
Yeah. Speaking of that, my wife works for the health department and she works in this area. And so when I asked her, I said, well, what are the symptoms, of CV or coronavirus? What's the symptoms? She ran off the list of symptoms. And I was like, well, it could be anything.
Yeah, that could be a lot of stuff.
It could be anything because the list of symptoms correlates with a lot of other diseases out there. And didn't you go and film hospitals, empty hospitals?
I did.
I did too. Yeah, we both went and filmed empty hospitals during that time.
Well, okay, and the reason that I did that, okay, so here's the, this is at the height and the beginning of it, they're talking on the news media, local news too. Oh, hospitals are filling up as the whatever, piling up. Like it was a damn warhead that went off in the city. Mm-hmm. Empty.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry. I can't make this up. Empty. This isn't my opinion.
Yeah.
This is just the reality of the situation. They were empty. I'm walking in and around these hospitals. I don't see a big line of people. They had tents out there. No one was there. The tents. It's like, it's where's the catastrophe?
Yep.
The news is saying something, yes. But the reality looks, I mean, I'm sorry. I just can't put my cognitive dissonance around it. I'm being told one thing, but I'm seeing something different.
Yep.
I'm being told one thing, I'm seeing something different. I'm being told all of this catastrophe. I'm being told about all this disaster. I'm being told about all these people dying. But I'm not really seeing life be that much different if I just would turn the media off. Life does not really look like it's that much different right now. Now, if a damn warhead went off or some kind of disaster happened, you don't need the media to tell you that society is truly different at this point. You can see the atmosphere around you. You can observe it with your eyes and see things are different right now. This is serious.
Mm-hmm. No,
If your city gets bombed or it's being attacked by an army, you don't need the media to tell you that. You can see it.
And I think that's the
if
thing.
you turn the media off.
And I think that's what was the point that was made. If it was so bad, we would be seeing all the homeless people die. We would
you would.
All these people with immune systems that were, what's the word I'm looking for?
Compromised.
Thank you, compromised.
Yeah.
They would be gone.
I live near 2 homeless shelters.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them were not wearing masks. They were huddled together when it started getting cold. Actually, it was cold when this started because I think it was around March or April of last year, 2020, that this started going on. And they were talking about how it's just ripping through America, just tornado. I did not see anything different. Those same homeless people that are always there are still there. Nothing different. If you turn the media off. I'm not really seeing the reality around me in the Triad, North Carolina, very different than how it's always been, with the exception of the media scaring the hell out of us all the time.
And how do you control people? Fear.
Yeah, it's definitely true. The meme for that I think really captures what you're describing is a pandemic doesn't need a PR campaign.
Correct.
No.
Right? For people to know, they shouldn't need a PR campaign.
Have you ever seen The Stand?
Yeah.
Stephen King?
Okay, so to kind of summarize a little bit before I get into my story.
Okay.
So you started off kind of like, okay, well, let's stop this. We got the 2 weeks, blah, blah, blah. We're going to do it. But then you saw the box.
Yeah, it's all about it.
And then you started to research and you started to realize this is not right. This isn't real. And you went down the
It was
Q
like a
thing.
damn social experiment.
And I'm still going down that because this isn't over.
Right. But the summary of it is you believe there's something bigger.
Oh, totally.
making all this happen. You didn't believe any of it from the beginning because you had already dealt with these kinds of things.
What are they trying to do now?
Right. And so you've kind of been just completely checked out almost from the beginning.
Yeah, basically.
And that's okay. That's the introduction to my story. Let me say up front, I think very differently than these guys. I love them, but I think very differently. My brain functions in a different kind of way than theirs does. I am not a conspiracy theorist. I even made a video about that on the other channel that I used to post videos to.
Go with it, John.
Yeah, I follow data to the conclusions that the data point to, right? I admit usually when I don't know something, or I could be wrong, or the data's sketchy or limited or something like that.
And sometimes things happen before the data comes out.
Okay, I get you, but that's not how I think.
Yeah.
I'm not. I have intuition,
he's not lying about
but
that.
I'm very data driven, right?
Yes.
So, but that said, I'm also aware that people are easily fooled, okay?
Mm-hmm.
We are biologically tribal. We are wired to follow the leader. If someone's charismatic or in a position of authority, people generally don't tend to ask as many questions as they should. They tend to just accept things as fact when they shouldn't. Someone looks good in a doctor's uniform or whatever and is saying something on the news. Oh, well, he's smart. He's got a PhD, or she does, or whatever. But the saying goes that you can fool some of the people all the time. All of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. And I certainly came to realize over time, and I'll go through my timeline here in just a second, that all of the people were being fooled some of the time. That was a true statement because it was happening last year. And me too. I'm not claiming superiority here. I totally fell for this at first, and I'll go into that. But another very important quote is that it's easier to fool people than to convince people that they've been fooled. And that's the problem I feel like we have right now.
Yes.
Is I feel like a lot of people's intuition is telling them that something's wrong. I think a lot of people kind of have a feel that, this doesn't seem all it's cracked up to be.
And yet they just comply.
Because they've sunk so much time and energy into it, the sunk cost fallacy comes into play. And if they admit that they're wrong now they feel stupid. That threatens their ego, that threatens their worldview. It might threaten their job at this point. There's all kinds of repercussions.
Feeling of security.
All those things happen if someone admits that their nagging sense of doubt is pointing them to the truth, right? And I'll illustrate it this way, and then I'll get into my timeline. Imagine that the water in the well you got water from in your house was poison. You didn't know it was, right? But it was poison. The water tasted kind of funny, didn't really smell really good, but it happened kind of slowly over time. And so you kind of got used to it. And every now and again, maybe you would ask yourself, this tastes kind of funny, but whatever. You weren't seeing any immediate impactful problems. But maybe you started to feel a little not so great after a couple of weeks. And just little by little, eventually it got bad enough that you're like, I'm going to have this water tested. And you go get the water tested. Sure enough, it's got some kind of, metal or something in it that's toxic. It's got a toxin that's making you ill. Okay, now you've got a choice. Do you say, well, God, I'm such an idiot. I should have checked the water last year. So because I don't want to believe that I could be that stupid, I'm going to keep drinking the water because I refuse to believe that I'm wrong, even though I feel like garbage, right? You could do that, or you could stop drinking the water. Fine, feel like an idiot for a little while. That's cool. It happens. But don't keep drinking the water. And I feel like what's happening now is a lot of people continue to drink the water, even though, and I just saw a Gallup poll about this, only 1 out of 5 Americans trust anything the media says.
Yep.
Only about 20%.
Damn it, man. That many?
1 out of 5. Yeah, 1 out of 5.
Jesus.
Trust it. Everybody else is like, I don't trust these people and what they're telling me is true. And yet look at the amount of compliance. It's a whole lot more than 1 out of 5.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we're talking about people refusing to admit that the well has been poisoned. All right, so let me go down my timeline. In January 2020, I posted a video because this is about the time I was starting to slow down on my channel. I I posted a video about this when they first started talking about C19, saying, you know what? Okay, it could be something, because at that point in time, there wasn't anything here in the States. I said it could be something, but you know what? The religion I was in gave me doomsday predictions all the time. So I'm not going to buy into anything until I know there's a problem. But when spring came along and people started getting serious, like you had authorities, doctors, people, CDC, people coming out and saying this is a problem and we need to do something about it. The media was giving a very grim narrative. They started doing the social distancing thing. People started wearing masks. Abundance of caution. I'm data driven. We didn't have any, right? We didn't have any data. And these guys can testify. I'm like, look, dudes, I'm not hanging out with anybody for a while because, you know, first of all, I'm an introvert. So I was kind of looking for an excuse. But the truth is we were being cautious.
He wanted to play it safe. I think he wanted to play it safe.
We were playing it safe. This is what we were told to do. There wasn't any data yet. So I bowed to the educated authorities that I assumed had our best interests at heart, right? Okay.
You know what they say about assume.
Which I know. Okay, wait. Okay. Now, let me see. Next thing. I got a ways to go. All right. So about April, businesses started allowing people to dine in, like restaurants here, but they required a mask, right? So restaurants, they were separating people. Remember, we went to Applebee's once, and they were like skipping tables, right? So you couldn't eat right next to each other. They leave it social distancing, right? But then you would sit down and you could take the mask off.
I'm just so glad that COVID works.
Yeah.
When you're standing up and not sitting down or laying down.
Yeah.
You're safe. You're good.
I refer to it as the magic immunity chair.
COVID's
when
like,
you sit in the magic immunity chair, you can't catch it. But okay, let's sidebar. This is what started making me ask questions, just like you with the box. Mm-hmm. I'm like, restaurants are letting us eat and take a mask off. All right, well, here's why that made no sense to me at the time. HVAC, right? The air conditioning system in a restaurant, the filters they use, they're pretty good filters, but they're not that good. I looked them up. I looked up the size, the number of microns of viruses versus the filtration of a commercial HVAC system. There is a filter that is good enough to stop about 40% of viral particles.
I didn't know that.
But the problem with that is that filter puts so much pressure on the system that it cuts the HV system's life in half.
It restricts
because you got to, the
Yeah.
airflow, the pull on it really
work too hard.
Very, very few businesses are going to purposefully install filters that destroy the HVAC. Mm-hmm. And they don't here. And labs, places
masks.
like that, where it's important, they use them. Normal commercial people don't use it, right? So when you take the mask off, you sit down to eat, what happens? Air begins to circulate. Yeah. It goes through the normal filters that don't stop anything, and it goes all over the building.
And this is central heat and air. We're not talking about a side AC out of a window. This is central. That means circulated heat.
Yeah. So that was the first thing that I'm like, this doesn't make sense because we're in a circulated air system, so it doesn't make sense. But even if the filter stopped everything, people are touching their mask to take it off, right? Then they're touching their credit card to pay, and they're handing the credit card to the server who is not wearing gloves at all, right? And the server's taking it and handing it to people, and they're putting it in a machine, and they're touching buttons.
Make it make sense.
And they're not cleaning anything in between all of this. So even if the filtration system would stop it, you're spreading it this way.
You can't stop it.
You can't, it wouldn't stop anything. And then you've got the places that have touch screen that every customer pays and touches buttons, and
gas pumps.
But they put the plastic on it, John.
Some places did. Some places
that makes it safe.
To be fair, like at Whole Foods, they would clean everything in between, right? So some places would do that. But a lot of places didn't do that. So I'm like, my data analytical brain is like, what the hell? Like, this doesn't make
Were
any
you
sense.
going into overload?
Yeah, it was bad. Okay, now, wait, I got to keep going because I got a lot.
He's got a lot.
You can also absorb water through your skin, through your eyes, through your ears, not just your nose. Your skin is the largest organ on your body. Most people don't think of it as an organ, but it is. Take a shower. What happens? You get a bath, I should say. Sit in the tub for too long, you get all wrinkly. Why? Your body absorbs water. Your body absorbs external particles. You can get sick from laying toxin on your arm because it will absorb some of it. It's how our skin works. It's not steel, it's skin. It absorbs things, right? That's how it works. There's pores where sweat comes out. Well, stuff can go in. Guess what? And so a mask might stop some, right? If they worked, which I'll get to that. But it certainly would not stop all absorption of these kinds of particles. It certainly would not do that. And then you've got all the other things you've already talked about, the HVAC, the credit card systems exchanging stuff with people who aren't gloved and all that. So all of this really was like you said, it was making my brain explode. I was thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, if you really believe that this is a threat, and at the time, like I was on board, right? I was on board with the fact that this was a threat. So, well, the only logical decision would be to completely shut everything down. You would have to do it that way. There's no other way to do it. The half-assing approach would not work. It simply wouldn't. And yet that's the approach I saw everywhere. And anyone with an ounce of rational understanding, I thought, would be able to get this. So I had questions. Now, we move into summer of 2020. The CDC, and you know this is my nail in the coffin for me. Mm-hmm. The CDC finally released the data that said 94% of people who died with COVID. With it. 94%. And they had, at that time, an average of 2 to 3 comorbidities. So they had some other major illness. I think the biggest ones were morbid obesity, hypertension, and heart problems, heart disease, something like that. And
so just so the audience catches that was 6% of the people that actually died from COVID.
At least that had no other things that could be pointed to, because as far as I know to date, because I looked into this stuff, nobody's doing autopsies. Like, you didn't have any follow-up to find out, okay, was it, like you were saying, complications from this thing? Do we know that for sure? Like, this isn't really being studied, right? And at that point, and then the World Health Organization came out and said asymptomatic people don't pass COVID. Like, that almost never happens. And keep in mind, I'm still believing the narrative. Yeah, at this time, I'm still believing it. And I think, great, now that the data is in, we can stop the lockdowns, we can stop with the masks, because the data says that healthy people almost never die from COVID. Masks are pointless for healthy people to wear. You know, the science has spoken, right? We have the data. Let's change it. Nothing changes. Nothing changes. The narrative keeps going the same way. Despite all this. And even like you were saying, like Fauci got on 60 Minutes early on and said, oh, don't wear it. Don't do that. It'll catch little particles or whatever, but a mask isn't going to stop anything. You're wasting your time. And then a few months later, it's like, they're absolutely important. And there was no major study in between those 2 days that said anything had changed as far as whether or not masks were efficacious. There was no study.
And it's not like he's an amateur.
Yeah,
This is a veteran doctor.
You would think you would know these things. So hang on, I got a lot, so I got to go through the story. We're trying to keep this not too long. So I talked to Carissa, to Jimmy's wife. She's a nurse, right? And she starts telling me about like false positives. They're trying to use these PCR tests. They're having to go back and retest people 2, 3, 4 times because it's getting mixed messages. And that no matter what someone died of, if they had C-19, COVID death.
Yep.
That's how it was labeled. And I've since spoken to other people who work at the hospitals here, who have told me the same thing. One guy works in the IT, he sees the coding and he says the same thing. Like, this is not one person telling me this. I've heard this from multiple people. And then I've watched interviews with nurses, ICU nurses, people like that, saying all these things. And I'm like, WTF, right? This makes no sense to me. Okay, we move into fall of 2020. By fall, I've researched PCR tests, very problematic. Lots of false positives. The CDC is recommending too high of a cycle threshold that makes them generate enormous numbers of false positives. There was a study, even the Atlantic, you can't get more left leaning than the Atlantic publishes an article saying, and this was just like a month ago, they published an article saying that we got to stop looking at hospitalizations because half of those people are either mild or asymptomatic. And when I saw that, by the time I saw that, I had already seen all the data showing that the PCR tests weren't being used right. They weren't being handled by people who knew how to use them. And even the inventor, the guy who created
Carrie Mullins.
Carrie Mullins said, this cannot be used to diagnose anything. And it's, if you buy a kit, you can go buy a kit. And it says this is not for diagnostic purposes, for research purposes only. But they're using it to diagnose people. So again, WTF, like, how is it this way? It didn't make sense to me.
I told John while he was going to be telling his story, I was just going to sit over here and just be like,
Remember, I did not start off skeptical. I did the social distancing. I wore the mask.
That's true.
We were very careful. True. I mean, we got
me and you got into arguments over it.
Yeah, we got Instacart. We didn't go to the grocery store. We had stuff delivered. We did all the things. We were part of the, what do they call them? The Zoom class, even though I don't have to Zoom for work. But we did all those things. I was not, this is bullshit. I was not like that. But as the data started to come out, I'm like, this is not what it says. And then I started researching masks, right? Because of the PCR test. Dozens of studies. I had no clue. This has been studied for decades. Masks have been studied. All of now keep in mind, I'm talking about random control studies, not observational studies, because that's junk science. Random control studies with separate groups, one performing the task or the action, the other not, and comparing the two groups, random control. That's the gold standard, right? With placebo would be better, but how do you placebo a mask, right? So dozens of studies have shown all through the decades that masks cannot stop virus. They can't. And other studies show that there are some problems with wearing a mask, especially long term. Within 15 minutes, you lose 20% of your oxygen intake, and that's very damaging to your blood oxygen level. And within 60 seconds, there was a study that showed, in kids specifically, within 60 seconds, the children's carbon dioxide levels reach toxic levels very, very quickly. Now, you're not going to drop dead or anything, according to the study, but it has negative repercussions. Then you're rebreathing bacteria because you breathe the bacteria out, it gets caught on the mask. And other studies showed that moist, warm, bacterialized environment actually encourages disease. Not in any extreme way. I mean, again, nobody's dropping dead from wearing a mask, but long term, these could be dangerous. And no one really knew or still knows long term, 8 hours a day. And even nurses were only supposed to wear the same mask for 3 hours and then dispose it and replace it because of the bacterial problem. So to me, I'm like, you're telling people, especially children who have zero risk, to go to school when they open schools back up and wear a mask that has been proven, according to randomized control studies, to be detrimental in some way, even if not a major way, in some way detrimental to their health, for something that the CDC's own data and Public Health England's own data says they are at zero risk for.
It's not right.
It didn't make any sense.
Hardly anyone's doing anything about it or speaking up.
This is why, I have helped fight against the school boards because
good for you.
Because of the fact that our kids should not be masked.
I think you've been down, what do they call it? What's it called?
The school board meetings?
Yeah, what's that place called? That's not Well, that's not Chamber of Commerce. Something else, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've spoke out, against that because, just like John just said here, nurses are being told not wear 3 hours, no more than
3 hours max.
Okay, so
you got to get rid of it.
So you're going to put masks on our kids for 8 hours. That's wrong. I'm sorry. I'm a huge supporter in the fact that our children need to be unmasked. It's just ridiculous because you're harming the kids. You're harming their health. And actually, I was talking to my granddaughter yesterday, and she said, "Papu," she says, "none of the kids like wearing it."
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I said, you know what? If you ever get suspended, I said, I'll be proud of you. Take it off. Defy it.
Exactly.
I don't care. Go for it.
Okay. I agree with that. Winter 2020, moving down the timeline. The first doses of the vax, right, around that time start going out.
Yeah.
And I'm reading about them. I'm like, oh, vaccine. I'm really confused and irritated at all this at this point, but I'm like, oh, okay, well, if there is a problem and this is, whatever, the masks are stupid, the social distancing doesn't work, this doesn't make any sense, but hey, we got a cure, right? Because that's what they were calling it at the time. They were saying the vaccine, like, this is it, it's going to knock it out, 95% effective, which I'll get to that in a minute. Okay, but they're not normal vaccines. Normal vaccine is, to my understanding, a weakened or dead form of a virus injected in your body to trigger an immune response, right? That's how it works.
Yes,
this is different.
Thank you for talking about this.
This is
Listen up.
mRNA, messenger RNA. So rather than injecting you with a weakened or dead form of the virus, and again, this is my understanding, not a doctor, not a virologist, not any of those things. It's just what I've read.
It's public information.
Public information. You can fact check me, please, if and don't make any medical decisions. You don't even know if I'm wearing pants right now. You should listen to, don't make medical decisions based on me. This is just what happened.
That episode's for later.
We will lose so many viewers.
After dark.
My understanding is you wrap RNA, ribonucleic acid, and a lipid, which is just fat, and it's injected into your arm. And so the cell basically sees the fat, it's food, pulls it in, dissolves it to use it for energy. And the RNA then makes its way into the factory portion of the cell and says, hey, stop what you're doing. We're going to make something else. Not what you want to make. We're going to make a spike protein. And so that's what the cells start doing. They start making spike proteins and sticking the spike proteins out of the cell. And that also triggers an immune response. It does. It does create antibodies, right? Because the body sees, wait, that doesn't belong here. And so it attacks it, okay? I'm not going to go into a lot of details about what may or may not happen because of that, because again, I'm not an expert and other people would explain it way better than me. But this I will say, mRNA has never been used as a vaccine. This was the first time, because when the FDA finally approved it, this was the first approved form of mRNA to be used in like any kind of large scale public use. There are no long-term efficacy studies, right?
Yeah.
No one's ever studied most vaccines, 8 to 15 years, depending on the vaccine, to see like, okay, what's going to happen to these people who take it 10 years from now? Let's make sure it's safe for the control group, for the study group, before we start releasing it out to hundreds of millions or billions of people. That was not done this time. It was released under emergency use authorization. So long term, no one knows. No one knows, never been studied, to know for sure what's going to happen. It's new. It's modifying the genetic code of your cells, my understanding, and creating something out of your body, which they're saying is safe, but we can't know is safe because there's no long-term study. And I have a problem with that. I think, and look,
tell them about when they end.
Wait. I'm going to say.
Okay, yeah.
Let me say this. I'm not anti-vaccine. I'm vaccinated for
not
everything else. Everything, all the stuff you're supposed to give. I've got tetanus, tetanus shots and all that. When I stepped on a nail, it's fine. I don't have a problem with that. That's proven historically to be very effective. So I never had an issue with that. I am not anti-vax. I am pro-science. I am pro-data. I want to know what the data says and whether or not it makes sense for me and my family and my kids and our current health situation? Are we at risk? I want to see the numbers, and we don't have them. We don't. No one can say we know exactly what's going to happen to people in 10 years in some kind of a study with an mRNA vaccine. Nobody knows that. So I think people should have the right to choose. Choose. Absolutely. I'm not saying anybody should not take it.
Beautifully stated.
You should choose. You shouldn't be coerced into it. You shouldn't lose your job for not wanting to take something that's experimental. That's all I'm saying. Okay, so let me move on. January 2021. Beth and I both get COVID. It lasts about a week. We recover. Wasn't really a big deal for either of us. She lost her sense of taste and smell. I didn't. I was just really tired off my ass for a week. I had never felt so tired, right? But we recovered. We were fine. I was mildly feverish. But we're good. So, all right. As far as virology goes, what I know about it, I believe I'm now immune, right? Because once you get the disease, you build up the antibodies, you've got natural immunity. That's what I'm thinking at the time. We'll get more on that too. Okay, spring comes along. More and more data keeps coming out demonstrating lockdowns weren't effective, masks don't work, but none of it's heeded. None of it is listened to. And the more I deep dive into the mRNA, the less I trust it. And I'm not going to tell you what it says, but I'm going to recommend, if you want to know what may or may not happen with these kinds of vaccines, go to the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, VAERS of the United States. It's a system set up in 1991 that if anyone has a negative reaction or thinks they did to any vaccine, they can file a report. And data is collected on this. So a very good way to see in chart form visually what's going on is go to OpenVAERS, that's open, VAERS.com. And it charts everything for you. It might be .org, but I think it's .com. So you can see and decide for yourself whether or not you believe, this should be something that we're doing. I looked at it and I'm like, nah. First of all, I have no pre-existing conditions. I'm not morbidly obese. I don't have hypertension. I don't have heart problems. I don't have high blood pressure. I don't have any of the things that would exacerbate COVID in my particular circumstance. And I already got it. So I've got antibodies, right?
Just remember when you're looking at VAERS that they're not reporting all the information.
And I'm about to get to that. Okay. So after looking at that, I found the Harvard Pilgrim study, which was done, I want to say about 10 years ago, that showed that only somewhere between 1% and 10% of actual adverse events ever make it into the system. So keep that in mind and look up the Harvard Pilgrim study. Don't take my word for it. I mean, pants, right? Don't take my word for it. Look it up. That's all I'm saying. And you don't know, you can't see. I can see yours. Okay, so now we get into summer 2021. The mask mandates here get dropped. Life pretty much goes back to normal, right? The case counts are dropping fast, right? I couldn't tell the difference. They say the case counts are dropping fast, but nothing seems any different to me. Everything looks the same. The only thing that's different is people were wearing masks. Like I didn't see, like you were saying, I didn't see people dropping like flies or anything. At this point, I've thoroughly researched potential health hazards of masking, and I just quit wearing them. And here, nobody cares. Like, nobody cared. I quit reading Google News. I quit reading the mass media. I'll tell you why. Because every time any major event would happen that was counter to the accepted narrative, a new study, a big protest, anything that went against the C-19 narrative that's accepted, there was never any coverage in any major newspaper. There were some like independents and smaller, like small town newspapers and stuff would cover media organizations. But it was mostly just ignored. Tens of thousands of people protesting in different cities, nowhere to be found in Google News or the mass media. And I realized, as have 4 out of 5 other Americans, that the mass media is not to be trusted. Like what they're saying is not to be trusted. But I would still read it before.
That's putting it nicely.
I didn't fully trust them before, but I would read their articles to get numbers, dates, names, those kinds of things, to pull the bits of data out of what I saw as spin. But at this point, I just quit reading it all because they wouldn't even give that anymore. So I gave up on them completely and I started reading independent media organizations only. And even then, I don't trust, but at least they give the numbers. At least they give the data. All right, so it starts making headlines in independent media that myocarditis and myopericarditis is happening in young people who take the vax, usually under the age of 30, and it's at a rather alarming rate. And it depends on which study you read, somewhere between 1 in 5,000 and 1 in 9,000, which I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you stack those numbers up against a kid who has zero risk to begin with, why? Like, why would you do this? It didn't make any sense to me. It got so bad that some countries began to ban the Moderna vaccine because it apparently created a larger viral load or whatever than the other ones. So Sweden, Denmark, Norway, some other countries just said, no, if you're 30 or under, you can't take this, right? But what about all the people who took it before it was banned? Because it hadn't been fully tested, no long-term efficacy studies. This is what I'm talking about. And this is why I don't trust it. But when the mass media would report on it, and it didn't happen often, it did come up, to be fair, it's always emphasized how rare it is.
Oh, yeah.
But I keep seeing headlines about this rare side effect, that rare side effect, this rare side effect, that rare. I'm like, wait a minute. I have never seen an article telling me about the rare side effects of Tylenol. You don't see that in the media.
Wow.
You don't see that. Hang on. You don't see articles about the rare side effects of all the stuff you can get from CVS. Why? Because they're rare. You never see this happen. You never see people die from Tylenol. Can it happen?
Good point.
Of course it can. But you don't read about it in headlines because nobody experiences this. Why would mass media be covering these rare side effects so much if they were so rare? I'm not going to give you the answer to that question because I don't know. All I know is that it made me ask myself that question when I saw all these headlines. I've never seen a Tylenol rare side effect article ever, right?
Goes back to the last video we did. We're talking about buzzwords that the media uses to get your interest so rare. Yeah.
Okay, so due to that, like I really started digging into the mortality rates at this point based on age, health, etc. And, looking at the minuscule risk to a lot of these groups and the potential for side effects from things like the vaccine. I'm like, it didn't make any sense to me. Even one of the guys who invented mRNA technology, Dr. Robert Malone, he said it made no sense for people to take the vax if they're not at risk. But he's very pro-vaccine. He helped invent the technology. He's fully vaxxed with the mRNA because he's an older guy. And he said that if you're old, of course, because your potential of death, because your immune system's weaker as your age, it makes sense. But even this guy was like, no, you shouldn't be giving this to just anybody, right? You shouldn't do that. And
glad you said that.
When I started seeing people, highly credentialed individuals, speak out, but be censored by the mass media, that was just one more reason not to trust anything I saw in the mass media. You should give both sides an opportunity to speak if they have credentials. Me, fine. Don't listen to me. Don't do that. But other people who have credentials, PhDs, long-term history, and doing this kind of work, helped invent the technology, you should be letting them speak. You should. And they were being censored. YouTube, who's probably going to delete this video, is censoring everybody, no matter how credentialed they are. So that's, again, I'm not an expert. I'm not a doctor. I don't have any credentials at all. But then these people did, and they got canned too. All right, fall 2021, we're catching up to where we are now. Despite mountains of data showing that natural immunity is vastly superior to the vaccine if the person being vaxxed hadn't already had COVID. The Israeli data showed that natural immunity provides about 27 times the amount of protection as the vax at preventing repeat infection, right? Vax requirements begin to happen anyway. It doesn't make sense to me. Even Fauci clearly stated that vax folks have the same viral load as the unvaxxed. It's clearly known now. You can still get it. You can still spread it, and yet there's vax passes and mandates and people are losing their jobs if they won't take it. But if the purpose of a pass is to prevent spread and the vaccine doesn't prevent spread, What's the purpose of the pass? You know, I get it. Yeah, no, I'm with you there.
Something to think about.
But I'm just saying, like, from a rational, reasonable person's perspective, okay, fine. If a mask works, I will wear it because I don't want to get people sick.
Yeah.
I will wear it. I'm like, yeah, okay, they kind of suck. They're kind of hot. They're kind of annoying. But if I'm saving people's lives, like for real, of course I'm going to do that. But they don't. The studies show they don't. Anyway, I should say the studies I've seen, maybe I'm wrong, I'm not an expert, but I've seen dozens of them and they all say no. Right? And I've listened to other people who are way more knowledgeable than me who've also read the studies and say no.
We don't have a reason to be convinced.
It does, yeah. And the same thing with a vax that still allows for transmission, still allows for you to get it. Fine. Okay, hey, the data shows that it provides improved resistance, like less chance of hospitalization and death, that sort of thing. Cool, I get it. If you're at risk, I get it. But it doesn't stop spread and it doesn't stop you from getting it. So if you're not at risk, there's no point, and there's absolutely no point in a mandate or a vax pass to try to stop spread when the vaccine doesn't stop spread. That doesn't make sense. And yet here it is in the fall, it started happening, right? Which they said it wouldn't. And here we are. Like you were saying, they kept moving the goalposts. So up until this time, right, I'm already perplexed about why in the world the science we keep hearing about is being completely ignored. Like, I know the powers aren't at B, they're not stupid, right? They know the data way better than me, but not any better than all the other experts I'm listening to. They have the same studies on all these things, but they're not acting on this data. They keep pressing forward with the same irrational policies, right? Now, it's beyond obvious to me at this point that public health has nothing to do with what's going on. Now, these guys have theories. You have a very detailed theory about what all this means. I don't hold to those opinions, but it is obvious to me that this isn't about public health, whatever it's about.
Right.
It's not about public health.
We can talk about that in the next episode.
What are they doing about cancer? You know, they're trying to get everybody vaxxed. What about all the other health issues that people have? They're not.
If it was to save lives and to help people, why isn't there?
It's about saving lives.
You know, free chemotherapy drugs or whatever.
Thank you.
But that's a whole other.
And I want to say this,
But
because I'm at the end of my timeline. Thank you for putting up with it. We all came from a religious group that would shame and shun anyone who disagreed.
Mm-hmm.
And I am seeing the same behavior in the world at large.
Yep.
They shame, they shun anybody who doesn't toe the line. The line that clearly is not backed, in my opinion, as a non-expert by the data, right? And so I don't trust it because I already got out of one really bad religion. Well, I'm just going to say it. It's a cult. I got out of one cult.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not joining another one. You got to give me data, reason to believe these things are true. So I'm a mirror also what you said. Ask yourself, how do you know that there's a terrible pandemic going on right now? Do you know because you personally are experiencing it where you live? Do you know because people around you are dropping like flies? Have you been to your local emergency room? I swear I didn't write this for you. I didn't know about that part. Have you been to the emergency room? Have you seen them jam-packed? Like, have you observed all of these things? Or do you think you know because somebody told you that it's so? You read it in the news, read it somewhere. You saw a video, an intelligent-looking doctor in a snazzy suit saying it was the case. Impressive numbers being thrown up on the screen, charts and graphs and things. How do you know what you think you know? Now, if you're honest with yourself, I think the answer is pretty obvious, or unless you're just in a very different situation from me and from them, you don't really know.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really know that. You've been told that. Same reason I believe the earth is round, which, anyway, I've never been outer space to look down, right? Somebody told me it is, and it makes logical sense. And so I'm okay. That's cool. I believe it. Doesn't really make a difference in my life, whether it is or not. But I believed it because somebody told me, and I had no reason to distrust them. I got reason to distrust
Right.
now. I didn't at first. I didn't. I followed the rules. I followed the, recommendations. I did everything. But as the data started coming out, but nobody was responding to it in what I felt was an appropriate manner, I stopped trusting. Last thing I want to say, and then you guys chime in, please. I just had this experience. This is how irrational this bullshit has gotten. Okay. I went to Asheville. Beth and I took a couple of days, went down to Asheville because we used to live there. And it's gorgeous this time of year. Yeah. Check out Asheville in the fall. Stunning. All right. There's this great little ice cream shop. I'm not going to name it because, it's not my point to call out these people. Beth goes in. She's going to get ice cream. I'm not. She puts her mask on because they're pretty serious about it. She goes in to go to the bathroom. When you step through the door of this particular little shop, immediately, I mean, not 2 feet in the door, turn left, there's a seat. There's a stool, there's like a window bar, and you can sit there. So I'm not wearing a mask. I go in, I immediately sit on the magic community chair. Beth goes into the bathroom. Lady behind the counter says, you have to wear a mask. And I'm like, I'm sitting down, I'm sitting down.
Not so
you
fast.
Still require a mask? We require a mask no matter what, blah, blah, blah. I said, okay. But no one else, I've been to restaurants all through this town in the past couple, no one else is doing that. And then she gets a little belligerent. Says, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. At this point, I understand that if I don't leave without her permission to stay, I am officially breaking the law. I'm trespassing. So I'm going to have to leave. But I ask her permission. I say, okay, I will leave. But can I wait till my wife gets out of the bathroom? Because she's not going to know where I went. And I need to tell her that I went to wait in the car. That's fine. She can get the ice cream and wait in the car. And the person behind the counter says, oh, yeah, that's fine. You can wait. Now I have permission to sit here maskless. And another thing to throw out here, I am at least 20 feet away from the person on the counter. There is nobody else in the shop anywhere, right? I'm sitting down in the magic community chair and I'm not wearing a mask, right? Beth, right before she comes out, I asked the worker one more question. I'm like, wait, okay, just one last question. If I got some ice cream and came back and sat down, could I take my mask off then? And she said, yes, you could. And I was about to say, that makes no effing sense at all when Beth comes out. And I tell Beth, I tell Beth, hey, baby, I'm going to wait in the car. You go ahead and get some ice cream, but I have to wear a mask even when I'm sitting. And Beth looks, oh, it's fine. We'll just leave. We just leave. We leave. That is the lunacy of this thing. Even if these things actually were effective and worked, the way they're being done cannot possibly work. It just goes against all reason and rationality to think that it's going to work that way. So there's my story. Hope you enjoyed it.
For that.
Well, you've come a long way.
Oh, good God. It's been a hell of a ride, I tell you what.
One of the things I wanted to say about, when you asked, how do you know that there's a virus? How do you know? One thing that I've learned, and again, goes back to the bigger picture of what I believe in. One thing that I feel like that the deep state and the globalists, they try to do, or that they actually do, is they use things to create fear in people that is invisible. That they, think about it, bird flu, swine flu, all those flus all those diseases that they've mentioned, SARS back in 2004 or whatever. There's another SARS. So everything that they put out to cause fear is invisible. If you look at them saying, oh, there's going to be a solar storm and it's going to knock out the electrical grid, and solar storm, how do you know? You have to rely on them.
Otherwise, they wouldn't talk about it.
You have to rely on them to give you that information. And it's kind of like from our former religion, they used a lot of things that were invisible that they couldn't prove to hold us under fear. Yeah. So that's one thing that you need to be mindful, look out for, is that climate change. That's another thing. It's invisible. They use that, without the proof and without the data.
I'm not going to go down that right now.
There's some things that well.
We'll do another video about that. We'll do another video about that.
So, but anyway,
I know how you feel about it. I understand.
Coming up next.
But you know what? But the point that I'm trying to make is the fact that they use things that are invisible to control the people.
Yeah, and
that's the point I'm making.
And here's the thing: I'm not telling anybody that they shouldn't think that there's an actual thing and people die from it. Whatever. I'm not saying that. I'm not qualified to say that. What I'm saying is that for me, where I live, based on the data that I have seen, which is extensive, and the experts that I have watched, whose credentials are extensive, for me, this doesn't make sense at all. And everyone has to make their own decision, because I actually believe in freedom. And I think people should have the right to make the decision that they feel is best for them and their family. But I feel like people are being told, you have to make the decision we say is best for you and your family,
Absolutely.
or you're done with society.
Yep.
And that, to me, there's no liberty or freedom in that kind of behavior. And this country is supposed to be about liberty and freedom. So why are we doing this? Okay, if you had the data that showed that I really was putting everybody else at risk, dude, I'm not an asshole. Like, I'm gonna do the right thing. But so far,
that's true.
That data
He's
is
right.
not forthcoming. And because it's not, I'm not going to put myself at risk to make you feel better. I'm
That's
not
right.
going to do that. Without data and evidence showing that I'm actually a problem for other people, I'm just not going to do that.
We're
That's
all about
not liberty.
inconvenient truths here,
It's not freedom.
not comforting lies.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is why I feel the way I do about so much that's going on behind the scenes, because I feel like there's so much going on that we don't see, that's been hidden from us. And I really think a lot of this has been used as a distraction from something else. And that's something we can explore in another video. We can talk about it.
Whatever
But,
it is, whatever it is.
I do believe that there's a bigger picture to all of this, every bit of it.
It's not what the mass media says it is.
Oh,
that's what I know, for sure.
Yeah.
Because none of the data matches up with the narrative that I hear. It just doesn't.
Yep, absolutely.
And I know I'm not alone, because if you go to places like Doctors for COVIDethics.com, and you see that thousands of scientists have signed off on this is not right and we should not be doing this. And there's the Great Barrington Declaration, and there's another one out now, the COVID Summit guys, like tens of thousands of professional medical people, scientists saying, no. But if you read the mass media, you would believe that every single doctor and scientist and virologist on the planet is totally gung-ho on the narrative. And that's just not true.
I'm going to make a little prediction, and we'll see how well it comes true a little later. I do believe that the mainstream media is the bullhorn for the deep state, globalist agenda, and I do believe that their bullhorn is going to be taken away from them. Don't know when, don't know exactly how, but I do believe that's going to happen.
Well, whoever owns it,
I wanted to make that public, just so I could say it.
Cool. Whoever owns the bullhorn, it is spewing bullshit, and we should not. I personally, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not buying it.
Yeah.
I'm just not. So there you go. Well, I got to get out of here.
Yeah, you got to go. We're gonna. So we'll. We appreciate everything, guys. Thank you for all the support that you give us. I know that us going in this direction is a little bit different for a lot of the folks, but we just felt like this was necessary. Yeah. We have a lot to talk. We got a lot more to talk about.
We do.
So
it's essentially a truth-seeking empowerment channel.
That's you could say that. Yeah, we're just looking to move on.
Yeah.
So, but thank you, everyone, for your support.
This video is totally getting deleted off YouTube. All right, guys.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a good one.